Welcome back. You're watching WION World is One. This is World DNA, the show that gets you ahead of the rest. I'm Shivan Chandra.
And I'm Hemkor Saroya. Just hours before polling starts in the United States for the 2024 US presidential elections, the early voting numbers have crossed the 80 million mark. That's over half of the votes cast before the election day, a record turnout. As the election day approaches, it could still, however, be anyone's game. And that's exactly what we'll be covering on the show today.
And of course, it all comes down to the swing states. Of course, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris courted the swing state voters in the last stretch of their campaigns, with economy, immigration and abortion the key concerns for voters. And this time, latest polls still show a tight race. We will bring you continuous coverage of the US presidential polls 2024. Let's start you off with the headlines. This is World DNA.
If we get everybody out and vote, there's not a thing they can do.
It's joyful work, and we get the job done. Let's get this done. Thank you all.
Kamala Harris and Donald Trump campaign in must-win swing states on final day of the tight US presidential election campaign.
Polls predict too close to call case race on final day, but betting markets favor Donald Trump over Kamala Harris in US presidential race.
A Pennsylvania judge declines to halt billionaire Elon Musk's $1 million giveaways to voters in US election battleground states.
Three men arrested and charged in Canada following violence at the Hindu Sabha Temple in Brampton, as Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi condemns deliberate attack on devotees by Khalistani separatists.
North Korea fires salvo of short-range ballistic missiles, claims Seoul's military. Pyongyang's second launch in days.
US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken blames Hamas for rejecting a short-term Gaza truce proposal from Egypt and Qatar, presses Israel again to allow more aid into the besieged enclave.
Incoming Manchester United manager Ruben Amorim joked that if his current side, Sporting CP, beat Manchester City in the Champions League today, supporters will think he is the new Alex Ferguson.
All right, viewers, there has been a lot of build-up to this, and now we're finally just counting hours to the presidential elections in the US. And as the race to the White House nears, our colleague Jyotsna Kumar has the latest for you at this point.
All right, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are spending the final hours before Election Day in swing states, attempting to tip the balance in their favor. With polls showing an even match, it's hard to predict whether U.S. will choose the first woman president or deliver an unprecedented comeback for the Republican presidential candidate. Trump held rallies in North Carolina and Pennsylvania ahead of a grand finale in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Speaking in the key battleground state of Pennsylvania, Trump launched another attack on Harris over the issues of economy and illegal immigration, adding that if Harris was elected president, she would have open borders the next day after the election. Now, Vice President Harris went all in on Pennsylvania, starting in Scranton and building up to a rally on the Philadelphia Museum of Art steps made famous in the Rocky movie. She told voters that if elected, she would listen to people who disagree with me. She is expected to spend election night at Howard University in Washington, a historically black college that is her alma mater.
When you believe something is possible, you put in the hard work, and you know it's good work. Hard work is good work. It's joyful work, and we get the job done. Let's get this done. Thank you all.
While Trump and Harris are leaving no stones unturned to appeal for votes, one politician is doing the exact opposite. Former independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has released a social media video. Now, he has urged his supporters not to vote for him on the ballot and vote for Donald Trump. Now, last week, the Supreme Court denied his bid to be removed from the ballot in Wisconsin and Michigan for the November 5th election. Now, a judge in Pennsylvania has declined to hold billionaire Elon Musk's $1 million giveaways to registered voters in U.S. election battleground states. Now, Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner, a Democrat, has sued Musk and his pro-Trump Political Action Committee, America PAC, last week, calling the $1 million awards an illegal lottery system. And according to the American PAC website, 16 people, including 4 in Pennsylvania, have received the $1 million award so far. All right, ahead of the official election day on Tuesday, over 80 million people have already cast their ballots early. Early voting results show more women have voted than men. And that is significant given that Harris leads Trump among female registered voters. And this is according to polls. However, Trump's campaign said it was encouraged by high figures of early voting in North Carolina, a state he is predicted to win. Major polling outlets show the candidates virtually deadlocked in battleground states on election eve. Polling aggregator 538 reported a 47.8% tie in Pennsylvania, near identical numbers in Nevada, and mere 1-point differences in Wisconsin, Michigan, and North Carolina. And for more on this, our correspondent Siddhant Sibal has sent us this report on Donald Trump's final day on the election trail. Take a look.
The last day of the campaigning is over, and now the United States goes to polls. Now this is neck on neck, and we saw in the last few hours both the candidates made a blitz through the swing states, especially Pennsylvania. Now, talking about Trump's rally in Pennsylvania, he slammed Kamala Harris, the Democrat nominee, on several counts, including on immigration, and she specifically slammed the radical left liberal. But all in all, this is something that he has been saying in almost all his rallies, but the fact that he chose Pennsylvania for his last campaign is a message in itself. This is a swing state, and one of the most important swing state because it decides the future course of developments in next few hours and of course days, as United States elects its next president. Will it be Donald Trump for the second time, or will it be the first woman president of United States, an Indian origin woman president, Kamala Harris? Siddhant Sibal for WION in Washington, D.C.
From Republican to the Democratic campaign trail, our correspondent Susan Tirani brings you more details on Kamala Harris's final campaign rally in Philadelphia. Take a look.
Vice President Kamala Harris wrapped up her final campaign rally in Philadelphia. The energy there was ecstatic as she reminded Americans that this election is one of the most consequential of our lifetime. The vice president has been focusing on themes like healthcare, upward mobility, as well as women's issues. And her campaign said that she wanted to make sure in these final days she ends with an optimistic note, in their words, contrary to former President Donald Trump's vision of a darker future for for America. We'll have to wait and see whether or not the power of celebrity and the millions from super PACs will ultimately draw her to the finish line. Susan Tehrani reporting from New York for WION World is One.
And that is all for today. Over to you, Shiva and Enhi.
Thank you so much for bringing us the latest, Jyotsna. Let's move on. Now, for more on this, we're now being joined live by Eugene Craig from Washington, D.C. He is the former Vice Chair, Maryland Republican Party, Chair of Black Republicans for Harris, and a political analyst. Mr. Craig, thank you so much for joining us on World DNA.
Having me.
All right, now, Mr. Craig, let's get right into it. I was actually listening to one of your previous discussions where you said that Black Republicans for Harris will be the margin of victory. As we know right now, it's a neck-and-neck race. You lead this movement of Black Republicans for Harris. I'm emphasizing this. Talk to us about this. What's your opinion at this point?
Well, look, I think it's a couple things. First and foremost, we as Black Republicans for Harris, we as Republicans for Harris are at this point in juncture putting our country over our party. Donald Trump cannot be elected again. Donald Trump cannot be allowed to get back into the White House and the levers of power of government. And so we're doing everything in our power to do that. And a big part of that is making sure that Black Republicans are, one, showing up, and two, we're crossing over, and we'll help build that margin of victory for Vice President Harris tomorrow night so Donald Trump can get up and claim victory in a close election.
Mr. Craig, certain predictions are suggesting that Trump is indeed leading in all 7 swing states. Would you see such predictions with a certain sense of caution at this point? What would you suggest?
Well, I actually think that it's actually the opposite, that Vice President Harris is leading in all 7 swing states. Whether you look at the early vote data, whether you look at the polls. Now, I will say this, some of the polls are skewed in Trump's favor. But that's just because, the pollsters are terrified of getting it wrong, so they're overcompensating with his voters when they're polling. But for example, right, a lot of the polls that came out of Pennsylvania last month have Black voters going to Trump at 25%. And I mean, anybody that's ever worked in politics or as a Black voter would say that's just preposterous, just not going to happen, right? But those polls have him either at 1 point or tied. So when you properly account for the proper weighing of Black voters, Hispanic voters, the way they should be represented in these polls, she's probably up minimally 3 or 4 points. But the way I look at it is this. The early voting data across swing states, now we can throw Iowa, it used to be a swing state, but now it's probably more solidly red the last couple of years, is showing that, she's up. She's up in Georgia, she's up in North Carolina, she's up in Pennsylvania, she's up in Wisconsin, she's up in Michigan, in Nevada, and Arizona. And I think, David Plouffe, a couple minutes ago, her campaign manager, actually came out and said publicly that I think they could sweep all 7 swing states. But that's something I believe, and I've been seeing in the data for a while now.
All right, Mr. Craig, that's the swing states. Let's talk about Maryland in particular. Of course, it has 10 electoral votes. It's voting for the presidential seat, of course, voting for the state's 8 congressional districts, 2 Senate races. Early voting, it's already crossed the 1.6 million mark. And, in Maryland, it's primarily been referred to as a blue state. Joe Biden won the state with 33.2 point margin, with landslide wins for Republicans coming in Maryland only perhaps in 1972, 84 and 88. That was Reagan, Nixon, if I'm getting that right. What is your assessment of the political landscape in 2024?
Well, I'll say this. I think she's going to probably beat Trump by 32 points or more. I think that her, huge landslide in Maryland is going to help Angela Alsobrooks and also April Delaney running down in Maryland's 6th congressional district, which then, helps the Democrats with their majority both in the House and Senate. But, that's just what it is. In Maryland, Democrats outnumber Republican 2-1. And, Governor Hogan was a very popular governor. But, it's going to be virtually impossible for the top of the ticket to be decided by 30-plus points. And then somehow, some way, the governor becomes like Goku, the Hulk, and Superman all at once and defies that, margin of victory at the Senate level. So I think, Vice President Harris is going to sweep Maryland. She's going to sweep Maryland and help, carry Angela Austin Brooks and April Delaney into Congress with her.
Mr. Craig, I am absolutely clear on your stance. You're giving all 7 swing states to Harris. You're totally backing her. That's clear. At this point, when it comes to economy, immigration, abortion, if you were to look at it as someone who's not affiliated or assigned to any one party as an outsider, would you give any of these criteria to Trump where you feel he's stronger than Harris at this point?
No, because look at the way you look at it as this, right? On the economy, Donald Trump wrecked our economy by being ill prepared for COVID, and then even when COVID was here, doing everything possible to not actually deal with the problem.
But Mr. Craig, was anyone prepared for COVID at this point? I'm sorry, I'm butting in.
Yes. Actually, the Obama White House had the national security team had a pandemic epidemic team and plan in place. Donald Trump literally trashed it on day one. So there was preparedness. There was preparedness that was there that could have helped us not lose a million lives. A couple million more that have permanent health situations, and then the economic damage that was done. But most importantly, right, if you look at what's going on currently in the economy, especially around inflation, prices on everything is down. Gas, the big marker for everything economy-wise, is under $3 a gallon average across the nation. It's been like that for 6 months almost. On the topic of immigration, Donald Trump told us when he got elected he was going to build the wall. Mexico was going to pay for it. But what we actually saw was that the wall didn't get built. Mexico didn't pay for it. And he actually didn't deal with immigration. But Vice President Harris, soon to be President-elect Harris, is vowing to actually deal with our actual immigration issues, not just, demonize, brown people that, look different than white people. On the topic of back to the topic of the economy, also you have to keep in mind that we have record number of positive job growth in the last 3.5 years under Biden and Harris, especially when it comes to black men. We have historic low numbers of black male unemployment, which is a direct result of the Biden and Harris policies.
Right, Mr. Craig, I'm just going to take it further from what my colleague said as well. We do know economy, abortion, immigration. These are the key voter concerns. We know abortion particularly, that's been the centerpiece of Kamala Harris's campaign. Now, I want to talk about some of the ballot questions for Maryland, which has thrown up some concerns, in particular abortion. Yeah. Now, Maryland votes will decide if abortion rights should be put into the state's constitution. However, it's the wording of the ballot that has raised some concerns, as it does not mention the word abortion. Reproductive freedom perhaps, but not abortion. Now, my question is, do you think at this point we're just quibbling over semantics, or is there something to it?
I think it's quibbling over semantics. Some of the hard right in Maryland that are opposing it, they never, have straight up, arguments or conversation about what actually is taking place. They try to find some weird, possible, hypothetical angle instead of what it's actually about. Reproductive freedom largely deals around abortion, right? The understanding and the reason and rationale why this amendment's on the ballot is to codify, the right to reproductive freedom largely around abortion. And to the Constitution, the Maryland State Constitution, but let's also be very clear here too, is that reproductive freedom also does mean things like birth control. It does mean things like having access to maternal health, health care. Those all are encompassed upon reproductive freedom. But the right, although they're many of them claim to be pro-life, don't like to talk about what it actually means to be pro-life and what pro-life. And what it means to actually stand up for the right for people to actually have a right to health care.
Mr. Craig, let me just now take it from a global perspective here. And this is something that Trump has really ensured that he harps about it to the fullest, because his claim is that during his term there were no wars. Now, if I were to just juxtapose that to now, there are tensions in the Korean Peninsula, there are tensions in the South China Sea, there are of course the two wars which are ongoing and seeming to find no end, and West Asia tensions are only on the rise. Then you also have Russia, Iran, North Korea, China, who have come together, which is a bigger concern. There are US military assets all around West Asia at this point. things have really peaked. Do you feel that goes against the Democratic camp, not necessarily Kamala Harris, but again, do you feel that goes in favor of Trump in this election?
Well, I mean, no, because the thing is this, right? The biggest war that's taken place for us is the war in Ukraine, and that's a direct result of Donald Trump's inaction, or Donald Trump wanted to appease Putin or appease, North Korea, or insert despot or dictator here, right? Because Donald Trump, wanted, Ukraine to give him some dirt on Joe Biden and withheld actual support and arms to help prevent this war. We're now doing our best to make sure the Ukrainians have everything they need. When it comes to the South China Sea and Taiwan and Japan and making sure they have whatever they need to stem off a fight with China, Donald Trump always talked tough on China, but almost every Trump product is made in China. And so it's like, hey, he knows it's politically expedient with his base to say, oh, it's China, the China virus, or China sitting fentanyl and this, that, and they're taking your jobs. But, he owns, multiple trademarks in China. He has almost everything exclusively made in China. And even his daughter has multiple trademarks that are held in China. And then when it comes to the Middle East, part of the provocation that we get here in the embodiment of Bibi Netanyahu is a relationship with Donald Trump. Part of the reason we haven't gotten a solution to the war in Gaza right now is because Netanyahu is doing everything possible to hope now for a Trump presidency to help pretty much give him the green light to do whatever he wants. So my thing is this, whether it's domestic policy or on the international stage, Donald Trump's not just bad for us, he's bad for everybody.
Mr. Craig, but back in from 2016 to 2020, you had the US president and the Russian leader, shaking hands, and that definitely means something better for the entire world. These two superpowers who are not at loggerheads as they are as of now. Don't you feel that is something that we really need at this point? And that goes in Trump's favor?
Well, I'll say this. I will say this, right? Vladimir Putin is former KGB, and if he's former KGB, he's always KGB. This is the same man who W said, he looked in his eye and saw his soul. Russia being the other strongest nuclear power on the planet, we're always going to have communication, and hopefully we come to middle ground on things. But let's be very clear. The provocation that Russia's been doing in Eastern Europe, starting with Ukraine, and they're hoping that they could take it as far as Poland and other places, absolutely must be stood up to, and absolutely must be stopped.
All right, Mr. Craig, I hear you, we hear you, and I would just like to take it further from what my colleague said. He's raised some pertinent issues there, and to that I would like to add that critics have sometimes referred to Harris's response on major policy issues as perhaps a word salad, and she's herself admitted to not being able to answer policy questions on the spot. Trump, however, we do know that he's very brazen. He's the polar opposite. My only question here is, I'm just trying to understand voter sentiment and perspectives here. Do you think that has any sort of a bearing on the pitch that she makes for herself, or the pitch that Donald Trump makes for himself?
Yeah, I'll say this, right? I think, part of, the issue that we have here in the States, especially with American-like media, is that, it's largely a world of two standards. It's the standard of infinity, where she has to give every policy detail, every plan within detail, and, his response can be something as simple as, we're going to build the wall. And it's acceptable, and nobody presses him on it. Let's also keep in mind, he's been running for president for almost 10 years, where she's been running for president for largely, 100 days. And within that 100 days, she's put out multiple detailed plans, when in reality, Donald Trump hasn't done anything near. Look, I'm a black man, right? I'm black in America. She actually put out a detailed plan about, how her policies would actually help the black community. Donald Trump, the only thing he's done in the last 10 years is put out a one-pager called the Platinum Plan that doesn't have any details to it. And so, while folk may think that sometimes, she gets in the word salad with things, she's actually somebody that understands the complexity of government, right? The complexity of our issues, and can actually address them. Whereas Donald Trump, will get up on stage and ramble about stolen elections, which are a lie, ramble about, researching, racial communities, and ramble about, just lying about things that, he didn't do, that he's claiming he did during his presidency.
So you're saying that she perhaps is unable to answer some of these questions because she really wants to take the time, assess the situation, and come up with a detailed plan. That's what I'm just seeking clarity.
And that's exactly what she's done.
All right.
She's put out, and this is the thing, she's put out multiple detailed plans dealing with almost every community within, the 110 odd days that she's been running for president. You got to keep in mind, he's literally been running for president 7 times longer, in this election cycle alone. And that probably number has become 21 times longer if you take into account the last 2 times he's run for president.
We hear you, Mr. Craig. Thank you so much for making the time and, taking all our questions. Of course, there are some things that go against Kamala Harris when it comes to that word salad that she has acknowledged. But at the same time, there are, of course, all the things that you mentioned, and you were definitely sticking to your guns, going right behind Harris. And we'll get to know, I think, in hours from now, what is next on the global stage, what's next for the US. Thank you so much for joining us. That was Eugene Craig joining us from Washington, D.C. Pleasure speaking with you.
Have a good day.
And with that, it's time now for a short break.
Don't go anywhere. This is World DNA. There is going to be a lot more lined up for you on the other side of the break. The United States has blamed Hamas for rejecting a temporary Gaza truce. We are tracking this closely for you. US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said that the militant group refused to release hostages to secure a ceasefire proposed by Egypt. A detailed report on this on the other side.
Also on the other side, 3 people have been arrested and charged by the Canadian authorities following violence at a Hindu temple. The arrests come after the attack in Brampton was condemned by the Prime Minister, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. More details on the other side. Stay tuned.
The Earth is sending distress signals. Wildfires, droughts, and melting glaciers. Can we reverse the damage? Explore the harrowing effects of climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate Tracker on WION World is One.
Know more, understand better, think ahead. Hello and a very warm welcome. You are watching Gravitas with me, Molly Gambhir. Get the facts, not the bombast. On the 26th of March, dynamic pricing, Baloch separatists, Gravitas cuts out the clutter. Gravitas keeps calm when others scream. Gravitas brings news to life. Weekdays, 9 p.m. IST, 3:30 p.m. GMT. Gravitas. Seeing is believing.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is One.
Welcome back, viewers. You're watching World DNA with him and I'm Shivan. Lots more lined up for you on this side of the show. Let's start you off with the headlines.
We get everybody out and vote. There's not a thing they can do.
It's joyful work, and we get the job done. Let's get this done. Thank you all.
Kamala Harris and Donald Trump claim momentum on their side as they campaign in must-win Pennsylvania on final day of U.S. presidential election campaign.
Polls predict too close to call a race on final day, but betting markets favor Donald Trump over Kamala Harris in the U.S. presidential race.
A Pennsylvania judge declines to halt billionaire Elon Musk's $1 million giveaways to voters in U.S. election battleground states.
Three men arrested and charged in Canada following violence at a Hindu temple in Brampton as Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi condemns deliberate attack on devotees by Khalistani secessionists.
North Korea fires salvo of short-range ballistic missiles, claims Seoul's military. Pyongyang's second launch in days.
U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken blames Hamas for rejecting a short-term Gaza truce proposal from Egypt and Qatar. Presses Israel again to allow more aid into the territory.
Incoming Manchester United manager Ruben Amorim joked that if his current side, Sporting CP, beat Manchester City in the Champions League today, supporters will think he's the new Alex Ferguson. The United States has blamed Hamas for rejecting a temporary Gaza truce as it presses Israel again to allow more aid into the enclave.
Now, as per officials, Hamas had received a proposal from Egypt and Qatar for a short-term truce, and Hamas rejected it for not including a lasting ceasefire to the war. In a telephone call with Egyptian Foreign Minister, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said that Hamas has once again refused to release even a limited number of hostages to secure a ceasefire. Blinken emphasized the importance of bringing the war in Gaza to an end, securing the release of all hostages, and increasing and sustaining the delivery of humanitarian assistance. Further, Blinken also spoke with Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant and urged more action to substantially increase humanitarian aid to Gaza. This comes after the US government demanded Israel to take concrete measures to address the dire humanitarian crisis in the besieged enclave.
But the State Department says it has not seen a significant turnaround in aid reaching Palestinians in northern Gaza. Washington has told Israel it must take steps in the next month to improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza or face potential restrictions on US military aid. This is the strongest such warning since Israel's war with Hamas began a year ago.
On the other front, Hamas held talks with rival Palestinian faction Fatah in Cairo to discuss the war and their moves towards national consensus. Hamas and Fatah are long-term rivals that fought in 2007, in which Hamas seized control of Gaza, but Fatah continues to dominate the Palestinian Authority, which has limited administrative control over areas of the West Bank.
Meanwhile, the Israeli military said it struck the intelligence headquarters of Hezbollah's Syrian branch in a strike on Damascus. As per reports, the attack killed 2 people. The IDF has intensified its strikes on targets in Syria since it launched a war against Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Hundreds gathered in Turkey to protest the sacking of 3 mayors belonging to the Kurdish community.
Now, the protests at Diyarbakir took place after these mayors were dismissed on alleged terrorism charges.
Now, the development comes weeks after President Erdogan's main ally made a proposal for ending 40-year insurgency in the southeast of Turkey. Turkey's interior ministry said it had replaced the mayors from the pro-Kurdish DEM party in the cities of Mardin and Halfeti with government-appointed administrators.
DEM, the third largest party in Turkey's parliament, has condemned the dismissal, saying that they stood in sharp contradiction with recent overture from Ankara that pointed towards a possible peace process.
Leader of Turkey's main opposition party, CHP, Özgür Özel, has termed the removal of mayors from the office as a coup. He has also accused the Erdogan government of seizing municipalities. Locals have also expressed their anger and frustration over the decision, saying that they will not accept the government-appointed administrators.
The people are tired of trustee appointments. It is a violation of our own will every time. We see it like this. We can never accept this. We did not accept it in the past and we do not accept it now.
All right, and Pakistan has passed an amendment that will extend the terms of army chiefs from 3 years to 5.
This measure to amend the Pakistan Army Act of 1952 could be viewed as an attempt by Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif's government to shore up support among powerful military figures.
And this move will extend the term of commanders of Pakistan's armed forces, including Army Chief General Asim Munir. Under the new law, General Munir, who took office in November 2022 with the timeline to retire in 2025, will serve until 2027, irrespective of a retirement age of 64 for a general.
The bill was moved by Defence Minister Khwaja Mohammad Asif in the parliamentary session. The amendment was opposed by jailed ex-Prime Minister Imran Khan's party. The measure could be yet another blow to the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf party, which blames the military for Imran Khan's downfall. The former Prime Minister has been at odds with generals whom he blames for his 2022 outing.
As per local media, it took 16 minutes for the Senate to pass the amendment into law. PTI lawmaker Omar Ayub termed this as bulldozing the legislation by the ruling alliance without any debate in either house. He added that it's neither good for the country nor the armed forces.
Lawmakers of Imran Khan's parties opposed the bill during the sessions and some tore apart copies of it as well. But the ruling government says the move will help bring stability and continuity of policies within institutions. Tensions have only been brewing between India and Canada. In the latest, 3 people have been arrested and charged by Canadian authorities following the violence at a Hindu temple in Brampton.
The attack on devotees within the Hindu Sabha temple premises in Brampton it's evoked sharp reaction from India, of course, including Prime Minister Narendra Modi sending already frosty ties between the two nations to a fresh low.
The Peel Regional Police, who cover Brampton, said on Monday that 3 people had been arrested and charged in connection with protests at a place of worship. The alleged offences include assault with a weapon and assaulting a police officer. It also said to have suspended another officer who took part in the protests.
Speaking for the first time since the row with Canada erupted, Prime Minister Modi slammed Sunday's deliberate attack. He stressed that India's resolve would not be weakened and that he expected the Canadian government to ensure justice.
And then India's Ministry of External Affairs, of course, also expressed strong condemnation, asking the Canadian government to ensure protection of Hindu places of worship. In its response, the Indian government said, and I'm going to quote here, "We also expect that those indulging in violence will be prosecuted. We remain deeply concerned about the safety and security of Indian nationals in Canada."
Videos of the incident widely shared on social media, including by Canadian MPs, showed a group of men with flags associated with pro-Khalistani groups wielding sticks and attacking devotees, including women and children, outside the temple.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau condemned the attack and said that such acts of violence are unacceptable in the country.
The recent attack adds to a string of similar incidents documented in recent years. Last year, a Hindu temple in Windsor suffered defacement with anti-India graffiti, sparking widespread condemnation and calls for action from both Canadian and Indian officials.
And this comes amid strained relations between India and Canada over the killing of a designated terrorist, Hardeep Singh Nijjar, in Canada last year.
Shifting our focus now, global market moves this week suggest the US election is on a knife's edge.
Risk-off sentiment has been building and the so-called Trump trade has been unwinding. Bitcoin has crashed from near record highs, reflecting the mood of a close election fight.
Extreme volatility is on display widely. Stocks in Sydney and Seoul slipped, pushing a regional index into the red. However, Tokyo's benchmark gained following a public holiday. The nervousness in the global markets is reflected in the low volumes across asset classes, with Americans seemingly evenly divided between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Investors remain mostly on the sidelines for now.
Gold was steady at near record highs. Oil was steady as well, after gaining 3% on Monday as the focus remains on West Asia tensions. After seesawing on Monday, Bitcoin crashed over 1.5% in a reversal of Trump trade since Friday. Traders are preparing for a long, close and volatile US election fight. The worry that the vote count might be delayed for weeks or months due to a contested outcome is likely to lead to more volatility.
Chris Larkin at E-Trade from Morgan Stanley told Bloomberg, normally the Fed rate announcement would dominate the week's discussion, but this isn't just any week. Larkin added that traders and investors who have been waiting for the outcome of the election have to prepare themselves for the possibility of a delayed outcome and the potential impact of that uncertainty on the markets.
There are additional catalysts likely to move global financial markets. Election day will quickly be followed on Thursday by the Fed's decision and Jerome Powell's press conference, where he'll give details on the central bank's interest rate path. A big chunk of US firms are due to report earnings. In Asia, on the other hand, attention is on the second day of China's meeting of the National People's Congress Standing Committee. The government is widely expected to unveil its latest stimulus package to boost the economy. For now, US election uncertainty remains in the spotlight though. And India's e-commerce sector has reported a significant milestone during this year's festive season.
Sales were almost $12 billion, marking a 23% increase from last year. Now, what's fueled this demand and what are the latest shopping trends? We decode that in our next report. Take a look.
India's e-commerce sector reached new heights this festive season, recording sales of approximately rupees 1 trillion or $11.9 billion over a month-long period. According to reports, this marks a 23% increase over last year's sales, driven by demand from non-metro cities and rising interest in premium brands. Datum Intelligence reports that sales have been on a consistent upward trend. Major sales events like Flipkart's Big Billion Days and Amazon's Great Indian Festival, all of these contributed over $6 billion in the first week alone, accounting for more than half of the total sales. Consumer demand for high-end products was a defining trend this season. Smartphones lead as the top-selling category, making up nearly 65% of all online smartphone purchases during the period. Amazon and Flipkart both noted a surge in premium smartphone sales. Amazon saw its highest growth in smartphones priced above Rs 30,000, predominantly purchased by customers from Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities. Luxury items also saw a major increase, with Amazon reporting a 30% boost in large appliances and luxury fashion, while Meesho experienced a 40% jump in orders. Homegrown direct-to-consumer brands saw gains of up to 700% in categories like beauty, shoes and apparel. The season's strong sales were reflected in digital payments as well. UPI transactions surged by 45% year-on-year in October, with 16.58 billion transactions in total. The transaction value also increased by 34% compared to the previous year. Quick commerce platforms also contributed to the festive boom, with sales ranging between $1.1 billion to $1.2 billion. This expansion highlights the growing role of Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities in driving India's digital and e-commerce sectors, setting the stage for future growth. Business Bureau, WION World this one.
All right, let's take a look at developments from the world of technology now. Now, 7 French families have filed a lawsuit against TikTok. The social media platform has been accused of failing to protect its users, especially teens, from harmful content. This includes an unfortunate incident that led to 2 teenagers aged 15 to take their own lives. The lawsuit alleges TikTok's algorithm exposed the teenagers to videos promoting suicide, self-harm, and eating disorders. Earlier this year, TikTok CEO Shouzi Chu said that the company has invested and made efforts to protect young TikTok users. Social media platforms such as TikTok and Meta's Facebook and Instagram have long faced scrutiny over the policing of content on their apps. Mark Zuckerberg's Meta is currently fighting several lawsuits in the United States, accusing them of enticing and addicting millions of children to their platforms, leading to mental health issues among the youth.
The US Supreme Court is set to consider bids by 2 tech giants, Meta's Facebook and Nvidia. Both Facebook and Nvidia are attempting to dismiss federal securities fraud lawsuits, which could make it harder for private litigants to hold companies to account. The court's recent rulings have weakened federal regulators, potentially making it harder for private plaintiffs to hold companies accountable. Facebook is facing a lawsuit for misleading investors about a data breach, while Nvidia is accused of misrepresenting the impact of cryptocurrency mining on its business. Both companies argue that they complied with disclosure requirements. The outcome of these cases could significantly impact the ability of private individuals to pursue securities fraud claims and hold companies accountable for their actions.
Elon Musk's own platform X has implemented a controversial change to the block function. From now, blocked users will be able to see posts of the accounts that blocked them. However, these blocked accounts will still enable to follow the person who has blocked them, engage with their posts or send direct messages to them. First announced in September, the new update has not gone down well with X users. People against the new feature say they don't want blocked users to see their posts for safety reasons.
X claims the block feature could be misused to share and hide harmful or private information about someone, and the new version aims to increase transparency. Meanwhile, experts say the new feature will enable stalkers and trolls to see posts while reducing the victims' safety.